Horizon Steel Frontiers was announced very recently, and I could be more disappointed, but I am disappointed for quite a few reasons. So first of all, this is not going to be made by Guerrilla Games. This is going to be made by NCSoft, which is a Korean company well known for doing their online games such as Guild Wars and Guild Wars 2, which I really enjoyed, but also a lot of mobile games, and this is indeed going to be a mobile game, though it's also going to be on PC and not PS5. It is not going to be on PS5. However, just recently, I saw earlier this morning, I think it was the CEO of NCSoft or maybe somebody who's higher up or maybe the director of the game, but they were saying that they would love for it to be on PS5, but that's not their decision to make. So it's kind of odd, but it seems like maybe PlayStation's not quite sure if they want it or not. Well, I don't know. We'll have to see. So that's interesting. We'll have to explore that. But anyway, this is a game set in the Horizon universe. So, same place as Aloy and all that that's going on. It takes place in the Deadlands, which is a new area that we have not been to. It's in New Mexico and Arizona, which is a bit south of 𝙃 territory, which is where we were in Forbidden West. But this is a no man's land. It does not belong to any tribes. So all the areas that we've been to before, in the first game, most of the territory was controlled by the 𝙃, but, there was some territory that was controlled by the Nora, and, we had 𝙃 running around. And then in the second game, it was basically all 𝙃 territory. So they control a very large area. But this is a space that nobody belongs to. Everybody's kind of moving into it and staking their claims to it and hunting. But, there are no larger settlements. Some smaller ones, sure, but not some larger ones. So there are actually two trailers for this. There was the one that was originally shown that I saw, and that's the one that you guys are looking at now. But there is actually a second trailer that goes into different parts of the gameplay and also has some commentary from both the director, I believe, on the Korean side, and a guy at, I think it's the lead at Guerrilla Games. We get two perspectives kind of on what's going on, the people who are creating this new game, but then the people who run the original IP. So that's kind of interesting to watch and look at. It is worth noting that everything that we're seeing here is pre-alpha footage, and also worth noting that they do not mention any kind of release date. So we don't know how far into development this is. Now, when I saw the original footage, or when I saw what it was original to me, the footage of the mostly combat gameplay, the shorter one, I was kind of disappointed with what I saw. I wasn't very thrilled with it. Then I went back later and I saw the longer extended one that showed gameplay outside of combat and, and had the commentary. And that got me a little bit more excited. I was a little bit happier. But then I went back and watched the older footage again, and I noticed that, everything's pre-alpha, so it's hard to say exactly what we're going to be looking at. And B, the longer footage, it shows gameplay, but the shorter footage actually showed gameplay with a UI. So that leads me to believe that the second footage is actually probably a little more accurate. The one that was disappointing me was that it is actually a little more accurate to what we are going to see in the final product, because the other one, the longer one that looked better in my opinion, does not have a UI in it, which to me is always an indication of this is not actual gameplay. This is all catered stuff. So for me, whenever I see a trailer, I really love to see the UI. It tells me a lot about what I can expect, to see in the game, like how do magic systems work or how do certain mechanics work or, that sort of thing. So I love seeing a UI. And in the footage that had the UI, I was a little bit disappointed. We'll get into that a little bit later. But in the longer one, they do talk about some things such as character customization. So you are going to be able to choose your tribe, which is very interesting. So you can choose from the 𝙃, the 𝙃, the Nora, the 𝙃, and the 𝙧𝙪, which is saddening to me because there's no mention and we don't see them. They don't talk about them. The 𝙃, that's my favorite tribe. They're not in this, which is a very it's notable to me. I was very disappointed by that. But it makes sense because they do live far, far away. This is in the American Southwest. The 𝙃 live mostly in the Northeast, where it's very cold. This is called the Deadlands. It's kind of close, to the Death Valley area. It's not quite there, but in that basic Southwest kind of deserty region. So it makes sense the 𝙃 would not be there. But, and this is something that I'm going to go into with some of my disappointments, it also doesn't make any sense that the Nora should be there. The Nora don't really leave the Sacred Lands. Now, that said, this does, I think, take place after Forbidden West. We see a lot of use of polecasters, which are basically the grappling hook. So we see a lot of that. We see them hacking machines And both the Polecaster was made by Aloy in the second game. You know, she assembled it and put it together. She's like, oh, I have an idea how to do this. So she built it. So the odds of somebody else having an identical tool doesn't make sense unless she showed him how to use it. And then also hacking, the only other people that hack were the Banuk, the tribe I like. But they did it in a very different way. It was very slow. And Aloy does it very quickly. You know, she's got her little thing that she got from the Pharaoh machines that can hack. So the fact that these guys can hack, pretty much the only other person that could do that was Silence, and then he taught other people to do it. So this would have me believe that this is set after Forbidden West. So there is the possibility that maybe the Nora, after the events of Zero Dawn and Forbidden West, have expanded, you know, and maybe they've said, okay, you know, Aloy went out there, she did all these things, maybe we should start heading out too. So, I mean, there are reasons that they could be out there, but to me, it was just kind of like, this feels like we're starting to play around loose and fast with the lore, which is something I don't like. If you ever heard me talk about things, I like my rules. So, and I like sticking to it. For me, it's more interesting when the world has consistency. But as I said, it could be, you know, that there are ways that they could work around it. So I'm not too worried about that. It was just something that immediately was like, caught my attention. Now, with the game with the footage that we have that you're seeing now, with the UI included, it is mostly combat focused. We don't see so much of the day-to-day things in the other footage. We see that people walking around looking at what look like maybe bulletin boards or like hunt boards. We see some conversations with NPCs for getting quests and that sort of thing. We see a little bit of the character customization in there, which they do have a new art direction, slightly different. If you're not familiar with Horizon, you're not going to notice, I don't think. But if you're somebody who is familiar with Horizon, you're going to immediately notice that this artistic style is probably closer to Stellar Blade. It's got a little bit more of that, you know, anime aesthetic. It's still kind of realistic, but definitely people are a lot prettier than they are in Horizon Zero Dawn and Forbidden West. And I don't just mean that in the sense that, you know, people are like, oh my God, you know, what are they doing to Aloy? That was that whole controversy. I mean, like, you can tell they're beautifying these people. You know, they look fresh and they wear makeup, which the Karja do. You know, so I mean, it's not like people don't do that in this world. But those were mostly the nobles, not the hunters. So again, something that's a little bit different. Not that it couldn't happen, but that it's a little bit of a, you know, mostly these are slight deviations, and I'm being nitpicky because I do really like Horizon. But anyway, in the shorter one, the more combat focused one with the UI, we can see that the game is going to be far more melee focused than Horizon is, which I'll get into that in a bit. It does have a stagger mechanic, which I'm not entirely thrilled about. It seems like a lot of games are going that way. Final Fantasy Rebirth did that. Final Fantasy 16 did that. Oh, is it Armored Core has a stagger mechanic? You know, a lot of the Dark Souls games have stagger mechanics. So they do seem to be going into that, which you can stagger in the original games, but usually that's done with special tools like shock arrows, or that's done where if you hit a certain special part of the machine, it can cause it to become unbalanced temporarily until it kind of reboots itself or whatever. So, but here it just seems to be a flat, you know, you do enough damage and eventually it will stagger. So it feels like it's a little bit simplified there. We do see a fair amount of weapons. The primary weapon that the character is using is a greatsword, or if you're using Monster Hunter terms. It's just a really, really big sword. We also see people using dual daggers. Notably missing is a spear, which is Aloy's kind of signature weapon, and the Nora's signature weapon, and the Banuk's signature weapon. The Karja and the Tenakth do use quite a few blades, so seeing a sword is not entirely surprising. The Oseram use hammers predominantly. We don't see a hammer either. That doesn't mean they're not in the game, but we don't see any spears or hammers, which kind of shocked me because those are the primary weapons of some of the tribes that you will be playing as. As far as ranged weapons, we see a hunter's bow, possibly a sharp shot bow. If you look real quick, there's this weirdly backwards shaped bow. That might be a sharp shot. I'm not quite sure. It could also be a sling, but it is shooting arrows, so I do think it's a kind of bow. Some of the characters have a bigger looking bow, so that could be a war bow. Hard to say. That said, it looks like melee is the primary combat here, not ranged, because most of the bow fighting that we see is kind of a quick shot thing. You know, we're not seeing some of these more like precision things that you see in the basic game. So it does look much more Monster Hunter in the combat. And we do see one tool that they use outside the Polecaster. They do have some kind of bomb. We see it's like a magnetic bomb that they strap to it. But we don't see any of the ground traps. We don't see any of the rope casters or the trip casters. We don't see any of those. So to me, that's kind of disappointing because it does look like they're basically saying like, hey, look, there's Monster Hunter. Let's just make a Monster Hunter game with a Horizon skin rather than let's make a Horizon game that's multiplayer. So that is a little bit disappointing to me. Not necessarily a bad thing, but it is disappointing. Now, for people that aren't familiar with Horizon, again, this is not going to make any difference to you. you know, it's just me because I'm being nitpicky. But also, what is kind of cool is that you can still knock the weapons off of machines, which you can do obviously in regular Horizon, and you can use those against them, but you can install those on your mounts, which is really cool. And speaking of mounts, we do get some newish ones. We have a Broadhead, which is, the common mount, and we also see a Sunstrider, which is the flying mount, so you get both of those. But they also have the character riding a Stalker, which is not a common mount in the game. It's about the right size, but we've never seen one of those ridden before. And that is featured in the game, is something you can ride. We also see them kind of hanging from a Glinthawk, not necessarily as a mount, but they can hold on to it and fly around. Which Glinthawks are not mounts in the game either. So kind of interesting. Who knows what else we'll get, whether they're kind of mounts. So overall, I have mixed feelings. There are things that I think it does look, and again, in the one footage, it does look really fun. And the other one, it does feel less Horizon and more Monster Hunter. For example, they have the Slaughter Spine swing its tail and the person parries it, which you would never parry that thing. I mean, that would send you flying. So they do seem to have a little bit more of a, that Monster Hunter kind of like, I can parry something that's 10 times my size kind of deal going on. So yeah, it does feel like it's moving a little bit away from Horizon and going in a little more of a quote unquote cartoony direction, kind of an anime protagonist as opposed to kind of a more grounded, this thing is way, that's why Aloy always uses range, because these things are huge. Going mano a mano with a melee weapon would not work well. So you have to be stealthy, you have to use precision, that sort of thing. But this seems to be going more for like, we're going right up against it. The monsters also, I should say monsters, the machines. The machines also seem to be a little bit slower. They don't seem to attack quite as often, leaving more openings to be attacked melee-wise, which does seem to be a little bit more of the style of, maybe like a Dark Souls or a Monster Hunter things, where you can exploit these openings. Whereas in Horizon, they're always just kind of running around. And then you have to use your kind of like focus time to slow time down if you want to be more accurate and that sort of thing. They're also, was it? So yeah, they're slower. They also don't seem to run around quite as much. If you're playing Horizon, you'll notice they just run all over the place, because again, it's ranged. So, they're going to try to get range from you sometimes too. But here they just seem to be, standing mostly in one place, moving around a little bit. But yeah, it definitely seems like combat is going to be very different. If you're looking for Horizon style combat, it does look like it's going to be very, very different. The art direction is a little bit different. It is more, quote unquote Korean. If you've played games like Black Desert or that sort of thing, you know what I'm talking about. The things are a little bit more pretty. The faces are a little bit more cartoonified slightly. Not quite anime aesthetic, but, moving in that direction. If you played Stellar Blade, you know what I mean. So it does, to me, feel a little bit more like a licensed game than a true Horizon game, which it is. Guerrilla's not working on it. This is being worked on by NCSoft. So that is true. Interestingly, what came out afterwards, because people were like, oh, Guerrilla said they're working on a multiplayer Horizon game. This is it. Guerrilla said, no, we are still working on another in-house multiplayer Horizon game, which is going to be made by Guerrilla. So the game that they were talking about was not this one. This one is actually a separate one. And they still have theirs coming out at some point. We don't know too much about it right now, so we're going to have to wait and see on that. Some people suspect that might be why it's not coming to PS5, because the Guerrilla one will come to PS5, and they didn't want to have two competing multiplayer Horizon games on the same console. That's a possibility, though I think these are going to be very different. This one's probably going to be a free-to-play and gotcha mechanics, and the other one's probably going to be closer to Ghost of Tsushima Legends, where you can buy it. You can buy Legends separate from Ghost of Tsushima if you want. But you can buy the full game and then you get the full game and you don't have all these microtransactions. There might be some with skins or something like that, but that's not the primary focus of it. So there's still that. It's also puts into perspective some of the stuff that's been going on Light of Motrium, which was the Chinese-made Horizon game, because originally they came to Guerrilla and they said, hey, we want to make a Horizon game. This is what we want it to be about. This is how we want to design it. And then Guerrilla said no. It might have been that they already had deals in place with NCSoft to create that sort of thing. So when whoever, I don't remember who was making Light of Motrium, but when they came to Guerrilla with it, Guerrilla, they were like, oh, we want to do this. And Guerrilla's like, well, we kind of already have that going on. So no, thank you. And then they went, and so that whole thing. But yeah, no release date. Kind of on the fence of this one. I really do like Horizon. Seeing the second longer one did make me more interested than the first trailer I saw. But I do still have some concerns. So we'll keep my eye on this one for sure. Not going to dismiss it outright. It might still be amazing. I don't know. But I feel at this point, I don't have enough information to make a judgment. So waiting for that. So let us know what you think about the new Horizon Horizon Steel Frontiers. Are you interested? Are you a little bit concerned like I am? Yeah, let us know what you think in the comments.